spiral at the moment.
We're in a free fall.
Every 11 minutes, someone's dying right now of a fentanyl overdose in America.
I met with the narcotics agents. I said, what percentage of it is coming over the southern border? They didn't break it out. They did 100%. 100,000 children that have come over in the last 3 years.
Basically, we're using taxpayers' money to send these kids off to sex trafficking.
The only way you're going to address it is stop the flow into the country. The Chinese, they compromise Americans, and they have a program to do just that. They busted a sex trafficking ring up in D.C. Federal contractors, elected officials, and they never released the black book. It is straight from the pits of hell.
Who is pulling the strings right now? I don't think Biden is capable.
It's just a stuffed shirt. There's nothing there. And a lot of people want to do this country in. If we can get to the polls, we can turn this country around. But if we don't, it's all lost. And there is no compromise. Lord, please don't let us lose our country.
Tim Burchett, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
And I really appreciated our friend John Black and Richie Walls told me they were friends with you, and you're actually one of my favorite congressmen to do interviews.
Oh,
so I'm probably
you need to get out more.
No, I'm probably more excited about this interview than just about anything we've done. So thanks for making the time to be out here.
Glad to do it, brother. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your background, because you were mayor, you were a state senator,
state house member,
rather, and now congressman. What made you want to do politics?
Well, Daddy was involved in it. He was old city school board in Knoxville there, and had his ups and downs, I guess. But I had a recycling business. I took all the city's yard waste, about 30,000 tons a year. And long story short, I got accused of taking toxic waste. We fought it, lost the business. And the day I think I closed, the EPA issued a report that cleared my good name, so to speak. And all the politicians had kind of run for cover. People I'd known my whole life and grew up with them, played ball with their kids, that kind of thing. And I thought if I ever got into elected office, I would not be that person that runs from the fight. And about that time, I remember the Clintons were entering the White House, and there was this travel gate thing, and there was a travel office that was that they were trying to get rid of the people. Instead of just firing them, they did the Arkansas thing and just destroyed their lives. And these people were traveling around the country raising money for their legal expenses. And dadgum, their legal expenses were about what mine were in the mulch business, And so it was a huge deal in my life. And I remember my daddy called me one day and said, this thing's bigger than that mulch pile out there. And I said, yeah. What I didn't realize it'd take me this far. After we lost the business, or I lost the business, I made the conscious decision. I said, I could either sit on a bar stool and feel sorry for myself the rest of my life, or get out and go after, go out looking for, folks that got run over, by the system, because they do that every day. And because I know when they call the office, they don't say, it's Congressman Byrd. They say, I need to talk to Tim. People I grew up with or in the community that see me on the news or something. And now people call me from all over the state, if not the country, about issues. And so I just decided to answer my calling, so to speak. And that's kind of been what I've done since I was in the state legislature, and then 4 years in the House and 12 in the Senate. And now I was 8 years Knox County mayor, and we did crazy things like paid down bills and didn't raise taxes, paid cash for schools, and were able to give raises on top of that because we managed the money right, and that's what you've got to do. And then here in Congress, 5 years, and people always ask me, what's the biggest surprise since you've been in Congress? That I wasn't surprised. It's kind of a thing. And they say, how did I make the transition from state legislature to county mayor? And I tell people God speaks to me, just not in an audible voice. I was going through the line at Wright's Cafeteria, which got closed down after COVID, and they never were able to recover, like a lot of great American businesses. And there's a fella going through the line, and he had his name on his shirt, like working people do, the ones that actually do all the work in this country and in government and things like that. It's not the suit and tie wearing folks generally. And there's a thing going on in Knox County called purchase cards, P cards, and it was a credit card. It had a good purpose on the front end that you would say, one of my guys down there at the parks, when I was the county mayor, would, a pipe would bust on the weekend. You wouldn't have to fill out a requisition form, wait till Monday and water's running. Mm-hmm. You could just go down to Home Depot or someplace like that and get it, get the parts and then file the paperwork afterwards and use your company credit card. Well, these things were getting abused. And they called them P cards. And I remember the guy was going through the line, had his name on his shirt, and he said, they said, hey Joe, I don't remember his name. Well, how you gonna pay for that meal with your P card? And I saw his whole disposition just change from this outgoing guy to kind of, and he didn't have nothing to do with that. He wasn't elected, but he was catching the public humiliation, which should have been reserved for the elected officials. Well, I said, somebody ought to do something about that. And then I said, ding, ding, I hear you, God. And so I ran for county mayor. That was the thing that made my decision for me, not, but it was just that one thing. And I tell people when they come see me, they say, well, God told me to run. I said, well, did God tell you you're going to win? Because that's generally, if they mess up on, they always think, they're just going to get ordained and then, and then people are just going to shower them with money and boats. And that's just not the way it works. And so they, we ran, we cleaned up a lot of messes. And then I was term limited and had the opportunity to run for Congress, and I did. And so, and it's been a battle. It's been a battle. I mean, everything is a fist fight in Washington.
Yeah, it seems almost all illogical. I mean, when I see the arguments, and it seems now, things that people would say 5 or 10 years ago that were completely known to be not correct, now they're arguing, for instance, what I would consider pornography in schools. And I thought we could all agree that pornography in schools is bad.
And the FBI labels those moms that fight that as domestic terrorists in their memos.
Yeah. Where is this coming from, though?
I think it's a lot of things, but it's mainly just good people have not raised up and said, hey, this is wrong. We've allowed it in our pulpits, in our town squares, and First Amendment. They can say whatever they want, but you have that right to disagree with them as well. And that's and the media is not on your side. They're going to misquote you. They're going to make you look stupid. And they put these knuckleheads in that are just yes men and women. Mm-hmm. And currently we take in about $5 trillion a year, and we spend a little more than $7 trillion. Yeah. 5 trillion take in, spend 7 trillion. It just doesn't work.
Why do you think the media is pushing what seems to be an agenda so hard?
I think a lot of the media, I've ran into some good folks in Washington here as of late, but a lot of times the media, to me, is somebody that's probably been pushed around a little bit, and now it's their chance to get even.
Revenge of the nerds.
Do what?
Revenge of the nerds.
Yeah, something like that. On some of them it is. I really do. It's just a way of life for them just to be against whatever's out there. And conservative folks are generally an easy target. We're probably not good at messaging as the left is, but I think people are fed up with it.
Yeah, one of the things that I've appreciated about you is it seems like you have friendships on the other side.
I do.
Which, publicly we don't see those things. And I think a lot about it. Like, what could we do to actually bring the country together? Why do you think that publicly people don't talk about the relationships on the other side? Instead, it's, we demonize each other.
I think they do. It's just not covered. It doesn't sell well. It's, even though Andy Griffith's still 150 languages and that's just not what they're selling right now. And they want something dirty and scandalous and sexy and all that. And, fighting Asian carp or something like that is not a real sexy thing, or trying to develop a business relationship with other countries so that folks won't come up here illegally. And so it just, to me, it doesn't, it's no rhyme or reason. There a lot of people truly are anarchists, honestly, in this business in Washington. They just want to. They made a career out of running it down, and they want to run it out. And currently, they're getting their way.
Yeah,
they're destroying our country, and it's very depressing. It's what I stay awake at night thinking about. I wake up in the middle of the night and worry about where our country's headed and where I'm seeing it, and the things are just so obvious of what's going on, and you don't see anybody really addressing it, and when they do, they get shouted down. Yeah.
I mean, so you see the country on kind of a downward spiral at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a free fall. This debt and, we spent $114 billion on Ukraine, and they wouldn't give Trump $4 billion to work on the wall, so that kind of, they said it was going to break us. Then all of a sudden, $114 billion, we didn't even give them more money. Yeah. We're fighting Russia. It's not our war, and a war that's with a country, Russia's GDP somewhere between France and Canada's, and we're putting a disproportionately large amount of money compared to, say, a Germany or anybody over there, and Americans are getting rich off of it. The industrial war complex, or whatever you want to call it. Our Pentagon, we've audited our Pentagon. In the history of audits, they've never passed an audit, and they've lost $500 billion in assets they can't account for. $500 billion. And how did we punish them? We gave them, $20 billion new dollars this year in the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. Mm-hmm. So we're out of control, and people in both parties are profiting from it. The uniparty, they're doing real well with it. When we decided to send them our missile defense system, Ukraine, people in both parties, lo and behold, had bought stock in the missile company and the missile defense company that had that contract, and then it was no bid type situation. They're the ones that could fill it, and they did very well on their investments, obviously.
So, I mean, when you're talking to people on the other side, or even in your party, and you're having these conversations, it's off the record. You're like, what is the feeling? Do they see what's happening, or are they just in denial, or what is that?
Well, some of them are profiting from it, of course, and they're just going along. And they want to be in power in both parties. They don't. When we were in the minority, they talked to us about, man, if we can ever get in power, we can decide the trips. We can decide this. We can decide that. We ought to be deciding about what we're, making the country a better place. But it is about power. It's about power. It's about control, and that feeds a lot of egos, brother. And that's sort of the way that's the people that are currently running our country, and in either party, in my opinion. We've got some good people. I like our speaker. I think he's an honorable man, but he's got a one-person majority. Mm-hmm. When the former speaker was dethroned, he said he's staying for the long haul, and then he got out pretty quick. You got a 1 year cooling off period from when you leave office to when you can start officially lobbying. Yeah. So he'll be back. He'll be making 7 figures pretty soon if he's not already.
I mean, is there legislation you would support that would stop that?
Absolutely, revolving door, but I think it'd probably get thrown out constitutionally. You have a right to make a living. I've heard the argument. But, yeah, I would support that. I'd support term limits. I'd support spending caps. I'd support a lot of those things. But ultimately, we wouldn't have the votes to do it. Everybody runs on those kind of things, but honestly, they don't have the guts to do anything about it once they get in there.
When you think about, like, the NIH has about a $45 billion a year budget. They fund all of the university research. A lot of the technologies are paid by tax dollars. And then when someone leaves NIH, they go and work for pharma with that same technology. And the same people that were writing the grants at the NIH worked for them previously.
Sure.
And, I think that's that's an example of this big, that revolving door.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is there...
It's on the front end and the back end. You have people that that in the consulting business that run people's campaigns, and then they help them pick the people that's going to be running their offices so that they can have easy access to them. And so it's just, and it's not illegal. The thing that you got to do is get somebody in Congress or Senate or whatever that's honest and just says, hey, this is your job. This is what you do. You want to go work for somebody else, you go work for them. But until then, you're working for me. And this is my agenda, and you stick to it. And that's what you got to have. But honestly, it's so big. I've heard committee chairmen in both parties basically say, well, the staff wants to do this. You know, these 25-year-old staffers that educated, Northeast education and frankly are maybe a little arrogant, and then they try to run the show. And they do, because you get an older chairman or chair lady, whichever the case may be, that just kind of on cruise control. Mm-hmm. And they got somebody that tells them where to go and takes them to where they need to be, and they help them raise a ton of money. And, so it's kind of a incestuous relationship, for lack of a better word.
I know that you see the problems and you seem tired, like I know you've been working hard and.
Well, we're not in D.C. today, and people say, well, you're on this vacation. But honestly, when I'm at home, I don't know about anybody else in Congress, but when I'm at home, honestly, brother, I do more work here back in Tennessee than I ever do in Washington, D.C. Although I'm on the run pretty regular in Washington. I serve on 3 committees. Everybody's on 1. Some people are on 2. And I don't think there's half a dozen that are on 3 committees, but somehow I did that. And but I volunteered for that. I want to be. I don't like sitting around and pontificating and things. I'd rather be going to committee. And every committee will have a subcommittee, and there could be 2 or 3 subcommittees of a full committee that you might be a part of, or there's somebody testifying you need to be in, and so and then you combine that in with constituent visits, and then representatives from organizations, whether it be labor or management or a corporation. And, I can have easily 25 to 28 meetings in a day.
Yeah.
And that's starting pretty early and ending kind of late.
Yeah. No, so, but you think like the tiredness is the fact that you're one of the only people that's up there like saying, what the hell's going on right now?
Well, I hope I'm not. Sometimes I feel like it. Yeah, I feel like it. But, and the thing you got to realize is people are representatives of their district. If somebody comes down there and they talk a certain way or dress a certain way or act a certain way, generally that's kind of the way their district is. Mm-hmm. And now, is my district a bunch of rednecks? Because obviously people think I'm a redneck. I wear my Carhartt jacket because it's cold. It's not a stylish. Now it's become a fashion statement for a lot of people, but it's never been for me. But I just don't know. Sometimes I think we've oversold ourselves. Sometimes I wish we would just get back to some of the basics, and I wish people would hold us accountable for that, but they don't.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to my business partner, Dedrick Perry, and we're talking about what is leadership right now. And he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, leadership is the algorithm. So, the algorithm on social media and online is leading what people are thinking. That's where the propaganda is coming in. That's where the echo chambers are happening. What do you think that we can do to break that chain? Because what you're saying is what I see. I see us crashing fast, and I'm blessed. I don't worry about it as much personally, financially, but I worry about everybody else. Honestly, I'm like, what's going to happen to this world? I don't have kids yet, but I worry about my kids' generation. So, what can be done? I mean, do we? You can only scream so much, but it feels like, if we keep doing the same thing and people aren't listening, results. It's like we got to do something.
Well, I've said that we've, the left is a lot more, I don't know if tenacious is the right word, but they got a longer plan than we do. They, conservatives, we'll elect Ronald Reagan and we're done. Yay.
Yeah.
they elect Trump, and then we're done, yay. They don't. It's the school boards, it's the city councils, the county commissions, the mayors, the property assessors, all these other offices that we just tend to forget, and that's where it's really happening. Washington is I don't know, everybody calls it a swamp, but swamp is a pretty cool thing. It's a ecosystem. It filters water, all these little creatures God put in it. It works pretty good. Actually, I kind of dig a swamp. What Washington is really an open sewer. It just flows in, it's stagnant, nothing comes out, and it's just it's a bad, bad place.
Yeah.
And the reason it is because we've just gradually let it get that way. Mm-hmm. We've just allowed things in to our lives, into our schools that we normally wouldn't. I mean, take, for instance, sports, for instance. Now you're letting men, dress up as a woman and then play these sports. You're getting girls hurt.
Yeah.
And it's just not, you've got a very average swimmer who, little Gaines girl there, she tied with, and they decided to give the guy, and he's in there changing his clothes and naked in front of girls. I mean, that's just wrong. And the NCAA and everybody's, we're afraid to get sued. We'll get sued. Take it to court. Let's fight this thing. It's the very tip of the tail wagging the dog. And and people ought to be angry. They ought to be angry. It's not right. There's a mental illness there, and we ought to call it out. But we're afraid to. No, they weren't born that way. Something, either chemically, externally, something caused them to be that way. And it's just wrong. And when I was in the county mayor's office, I remembered we had sex offenders, former sex offenders, and to me they're never formal, especially they mess with kids, that were going into our library, and and that became an issue. And I said, if we know they're banned, and they said, you're going to get sued. I said, please do it in an election year. Because that it's still Tennessee, brother.
Free press.
And, yeah,
let's go.
And that would be the best. I wouldn't even have a fundraiser. I wouldn't have a campaign meeting. I'd just get a petition and run for re-election, because that would re-elect me. Because the bulk of the people realize we don't need sex offenders in our kids' libraries. These are, and they were around children and things, and it's just wrong. And everybody's wringing their hands and ACLU, and I was, please, come after me. I would love that, because first of all, it would expose them for what they were, and it would also embolden our base.
Yeah,
protect children. Ultimately, it would protect the children.
The entire trans thing, it's pretty outrageous. I always joke now that men are the best women.
Yeah,
men really are the best women. I mean, Woman of the Year, Times Woman of the Year, I think 2 years. And the idea, here's what's interesting that's really happened since COVID. Everybody said, trust science, trust science. And if you didn't trust science, you're dumb or this or that. But it was only the science that they were pitching. Science put a $sign around that S, and that's what that science is. And what really frustrates me now is with the trans agenda, they were saying, scientifically, it's shown that there's no difference. And people buy it hook, line, and sinker. That algorithm is showing them these things over and over in social media, programming their brains, and it's creating a bunch of really crazy people. So it's hard to have an argument. If you and I have a disagreement, and we're coming from a good place, both coming from a good place, we can have a discussion. But when people have just crazy ideas, that it's not on an even playing field, how do you conversate with that?
You can't. There's not a whole lot. You can't reason with some folks, and there's no reasoning on that issue. It's just that's why I don't understand the gay community. They need to separate themselves from that whole thing, because generally, the gay folks that I know, they just looking to earn a living and mind their own business like the rest of us. Yeah, and it's just the activists that are out there, and then they, I think it's hurting their cause, is what I think. I think it really is, because you wrap yourself up into that. There's so many initials now. watch some of my colleagues, and they just go down that list, and I have to ask somebody about the last three usually because I can't figure out what the heck they are. And to me, you dilute your cause. I think that's what they're doing. But the trans thing is you're going to see more girls get hurt in contact sports like basketball, like rugby, like female wrestling now, and wrestling, I should say, wrestling's what they do in East Tennessee. But I think we just lost our way.
Well, I think like with that community, they used to be bullied, let's say 25, 30 years ago.
Did, and that's wrong.
And now, yeah, absolutely, it was wrong. And I would actually stick up for them. But now I see that movement as being the bullies. Because if you just disagree a little bit, you're a transphobe, you're a homophobe, you're a this phobe, that phobe, and none of it's true. No. I don't have anything against anybody. I just don't think that biological men should compete in female sports.
Yeah. I always tweet, I say, it's a dude. And everybody, but it's the truth. Prove me wrong. I mean, it's the science.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Chromosomes. What's going on at the border? I wanted to kind of talk to you about this because it seems like, it's obvious that we're being, I'm going to call it an invasion. That's what it seems like to me. But we're obviously having a lot of people come in more than ever. And the other side just seems to be acting like it's not an issue. And I got attacked on my Instagram page saying, "Oh, it was the same under Trump." I'm like, "No, it wasn't."
No, it wasn't.
Look at the numbers.
We've had the government will tell you 8 million. Some will tell you 10. It's probably more. It's 8 million contacts. Then you have the 100,000 children who we don't know where they are, and that's and again, you've got your national chambers of commerce, not your local chamber of commerce, but your national chambers of commerce, and they pretty much block everything like that. They want somebody on your roof who, if they fall off, has no legal grounds to come after you, that they can pay a little less than everybody else, and nobody's going to complain because who are they going to complain to? They're afraid they'll get deported. So we've got a real problem there. It's one of the largest groups now are Chinese, and we know if the Chinese roll on Taiwan, where are these hundreds of thousands of Chinese? Whose side are they going to be on, and where are they in our country? Well, we don't know.
Yeah,
we don't know, and and the amount of money, it's $400 billion this year probably is what we'll pay to keep these folks up. New York has put $53 million into credit cards to give them. California is offering free health care for them, and it just never ends. It never ends. And these, like Guatemala, for instance, they don't have enough adult men to fill the jobs because they've all come up here. Of course, you're going to work, you come up here and get a free ride. They're going to go for the free ride.
Sure.
And then under Trump, it wasn't a catch and release. It was return to Mexico thing where you go back to Mexico, and when it's your turn, we'll call you up. Now they just turn them into the system, and maybe 10 years later we expect them to come back to court, and that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And when they get here, I've been at the border, and they'll issue them clothes. They issue them, and they're flying people places. They're giving them bus fare places. They'll feed them and medical care, and just go down the list. And it's we've magnetized our country, and we are rapidly losing our country because of it. In these big cities, they're congregating, and it's going to just get uglier and uglier. And there's no way you can deport 10 million people.
No.
I mean, I don't know what kind of bus line that would look like or train service or whatever, but it would be a huge nightmare. And we need to, it's a boat that's taking on water. And some people want to bail. Some people want to sit there and just sink. I want to plug the hole and bail. So I think there's, and these cartels, my gosh, they are just evil. They're these kids and these sex trafficking things and probably organ harvesting. Just let your mind wander the worst things in the world. And the millions upon millions every month they're making, hauling humans over the border and getting them into this country. To me, it's unbelievable. And fentanyl, everybody knows somebody that had a run-in with that. And I was a young lady. I was about to say little girl. We were in high school together. She was a little girl. And she was younger than me, and I met with her a couple weeks ago, and her little boy had OD'd and died, of course, on fentanyl. And it's just a horrible. And I had a bill dealing with fentanyl. I couldn't even get the Democrats to let me give me a hearing on it because they would have had to admit there's a problem at the border. I met with the narcotics agents about 3 weeks ago. I said, what percentage of it is coming over the southern border? And they said, they didn't blink an eye, they said 100%. And I was like, 100%? I mean, I know there's some coming in, they'll catch a briefcase of it somewhere, but generally they're muling it in across our southern border. I mean, if you're going to risk going through a port of entry or just running across, giving somebody a backpack and say, head on up to Texas somewhere, and you'll meet somebody at a bus stop, and they'll give you money for it, and here's the deal. And you're free to go.
Well, it says that like every 11 minutes, someone's dying right now of a fentanyl overdose in America. My girlfriend from high school died yesterday of a fentanyl overdose. Just yesterday. My first love. I mean, that's how close it is to me right now.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it. 42, 43 years old she is now. And, it's incredible to think that, like, where's the humanity? Not money, not politics, but humanity to know that you have fentanyl coming over the border, but you don't want to admit there's a border problem, and you're just pretty much letting people die, destroying the country. What does the other side say when you talk to like the friends that you have on the other side? Do they actually see it? Like,
what they see is in Washington. They just see staying in power. In both parties, there's some that are guilty of that. And it's just staying in power. And if they like now, they're trying to capitalize on what's going on at the border because it's just so prevalent. Or it depends. I remember back when it was 42% thought it was an issue, something like that, and now it's in the 60 to depend on. I've heard them up. It's 85% of the population thinks that there's a real problem there, and I'm one of them. But I've been one of them for a long time. I just shake my head because they just won't address it. And the only way you're going to address it is stop the flow into the country.
Yeah. And
the only way you're going to do that is build that dadgum wall, and you're going to have our military there, pull them out of these countries where we shouldn't be in, and put them down on our southern border.
Yeah.
They have a job to do, not protect Afghanistan, not to protect some oil baron over in the Middle East. Protect and preserve the Constitution of the United States. And I would submit to you, our southern borders are very constitutionally sound to protect them.
Yeah. I was watching Dr. Phil on, I think it was The View or it was Joe Rogan, one of the two. I actually watched both interviews, and he was going pretty hard on the southern border. He had been down there, and he said he was talking to the head of the border union, and he was saying that kids were going across with numbers on their arms or hands, and they would call the person, but we're not even checking to see if it's really their family. And basically, we're using government money, taxpayers' money, to send these kids off to sex trafficking.
100%. 100%.
I mean, what the hell? I mean, it's just...
Yeah, what the hell? I'll tell you, there's a couple of things I don't think God's going to stand for much longer, and that's one of them. With our country, we've been blessed beyond belief, but we better be prepared because we have shunned what He's told us, and just what are social norms on that issue. It just can't keep going like it is, and for us to allow it is just beyond belief. I mean, the Democrats just, they'll call you a racist, they'll call you, you're a xenophobe or whatever the latest trend that they've figured out. Some focus groups told them is to call us, but I don't think the American public believes it. I hope they don't stand for it. But that's what happens when 20 million so-called conservative Americans decide to stay home on Election Day. That's exactly what happens.
Well, and, with the sex trafficking issue, my business partners and I funded a documentary a few years ago called It's Happening Right Here. And I was on the board of Operation Light Shine, which is a anti-trafficking organization. And when we first started, I remember, and I know there's been some controversy around Tim Ballard, but there was a Operation Underground Railroad documentary that my friend Nick Nanton did. He was the person that directed that first documentary, and I saw it. I said, Nick, it's an incredible documentary, first of all. But I said, if you need anything, like, we want to help, And I thought, I remember having a conversation with my friend Robin Williams, and she said, yeah, this is one of those issues that you can't deny. Nobody would be for this, et cetera. 2020 happens, and all of a sudden it became a conspiracy theory. We got paired in with QAnon. I honestly didn't even know what QAnon was when they were saying it.
I still don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But you're just calling out evil, and that's what you're at. Because that lends you to believe that it probably goes a lot higher and it's a lot deeper than we realize. And for it to even go on at all is bad. But at some of the levels, the Epstein thing, for instance, they still don't know who's in his black book.
Yeah,
they busted I said the obvious, what everybody thinks, and I talked about how the Chinese have probably conspired or compromised is the word I use. They compromise Americans, and they have a program just to do just that. And they busted a sex trafficking ring up in D.C., and it said federal contractors, elected officials, and some other groups they listed that were there, and they never released the black book. This was several months ago.
Yep.
So there's a lot going on in that business, and it's awful. It is straight from the pits of hell. And for this country to allow it to go on is beyond me in this White House, and they're just in complete denial. Again, it's about staying in power.
Well,
the so-called greater good for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a crazy issue that I don't know anybody that would be for it, right?
Sure.
And it's just like, so it's hard for me to comprehend who could be for this. But I was shocked when I got thrown in with the QAnon stuff, and I was told that I was making up a conspiracy. And we've been working on this. Some of my friends are heavy. They're going on missions. They're
Sure.
risking their lives. And so, and when the movie came out, what was the movie with the anti-trafficking movie, or they went to Columbia?
That was in that. There we go.
Yeah, Sound of
DC.
Freedom.
Yeah, Sound of Freedom.
Yeah, when Sound of Freedom came out,
guys.
that was based off of a documentary Nick did. It hadn't been released yet. I had seen that documentary. He wasn't allowed to release it. I saw it already. So I saw the undercover stuff, and
100%.
it's real. I don't know why it's so hard for people to just acknowledge, like, why can't we?
When I was in the state legislature, and this has been, probably 15 years ago, I remembered I brought in, it's ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, where they'd get on there and these pedophiles would contact yours and my kids. And so the ICAC would get on these sites and pose as children. And I remember I was trying to get $5 million to set these things up in the 3 grand divisions. And it was proven to work. They just throw the bait out there and these perverts jump on board and they bust their ass. And so I brought all the senators in, and I brought my guys in, and they had this screen up, showed all 95 counties. And they said, what's that? And they said, well, that's activity in your county that we know is traced to pedophiles. And they said, and I remember one of my dearest friends in the Senate, she said, pull up, and one of her little counties. And at that time, I think there was 3 or 5 activities going on between somebody that probably shouldn't have been going on. Mm-hmm. And, and right then I got my $5 million,
Yeah.
It was, it wasn't that hard to sell after that. And so we, but yeah, and it's a moving target though. They're very, the dark web, that's a very limited group. You could literally go on these sites, and this was, let's say 10 or 15 years ago. And you could literally go on a site and say, this is what I'd like. And then they would get it for you. You'd see the video or whatever of it. And it was and I never went and viewed it. I never wanted to see it. That stuff wrecks me.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, this is years ago. And to think it's with the internet and everything going on now, how advanced it's gotten and how fast it's moving. It's it's a very dangerous situation we've got ourselves into in this country, and it is deep, and it's millions upon millions, and it's not billions of dollars. So yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, in our documentary, we actually showed how it's happening in the United States, and it was we didn't make it in a controversial way. It was like showing the techniques that they use to protect, the children. But even seeing some of the comments and stuff, it's disappointing.
Yeah,
that they would have,
Well, you got to wonder too. Some of those people that are doing that are coming after you. You got to wonder if they're not working for the other side. Just
sure,
the trolls, so to speak, and we've got plenty of those. And that they've got plenty of those, and a lot of them are overseas, and it's international right now. But 100,000 children we don't know where they are right now in America.
Wow,
to me, that have come over in the last 3 years.
Wow,
that's a minimum. I mean, that's not even. There's no telling. There's no telling, brother, and we're not lifting a finger. We can't get, the bill's stalled right now, and they keep saying, well, there's a bipartisan bill that you all killed. Well, it wasn't just because you got to, if that term bipartisan, maybe by definition that's correct, but the reality was it didn't have any, that bill that got killed, you had to have 5,000 interactions a day before it would kick in. So 4,999 illegals coming over our border a day is okay.
Yeah,
and then they said they'd shut the border down, which they apparently don't have the capability to do right now. If they could do it by executive order.
Yeah,
and so it's just a lie, and the media is part of it, and and they're allowed to do that.
Who do you think is behind this? Because that's what I want to know. Like, who is pulling the strings right now? I don't think Biden is capable of
No,
it.
Biden's not with it. I've had my limited conversations with him has been. I went from anger to pity. I pray for him. I hope that because the vice president is, who I feel is a very mean person, and she's out of that California, cut from that California cloth, and that, to me, that's a scary situation. I think you've got some 25-year-old staffers that got his ear, but I think you've got holdovers, obviously, from the Obama administration that have interjected themselves in there and that are making. I think the president is just he's just a stuffed shirt. There's nothing there. I don't think cognitively he's with it. He has very little ability whatsoever. What you see on the television is so cleaned up than what you would see in real life. The shuffling of the feet, the losing the train of thought. I mean, I lose my train of thought all the time, but I'm not the one holding the nuclear football either.
Yeah.
I'm the 435th most powerful member of Congress.
Yeah.
And right now we're being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Very much so. I think we're compromised. I think you've seen the multi-million-dollar investments through his son Hunter that are from Chinese communists that we don't know if they've even paid any taxes on any of this stuff. And you're not getting the full story from the media, mainly because they have so much invested in this guy and they hate Trump. So they're gonna push him over the finish line as much as they can because they have so much invested in their reputation and their egos are just too much.
Do you think that they're going to leave Biden in though? Like I've thought, come June, July, new person in because he's just. I mean, he seems incapable. Like you said, he's worse in person. I don't know that. I haven't seen him, but he seems pretty bad when I see him on TV.
Yeah, it's worse. I honestly think they're going to bring in Newsom out of California, and because I saw Newsom, he's wrecked that economy, but it doesn't seem to matter to people as long as it's still flowing in with them, whether it's even if it's worthless, the currency that is. If you remember back, and this is my own theory, so nobody else has said it, but when Hollywood was on strike, nobody cared. They didn't miss it. I remember one time they went on strike, and it was Happy Days was on, and it's kind of disturbing to me because Fonzie had done this great jump, and you didn't know if he crashed or not. And then the actors everybody went on strike in Hollywood. This was in the 70s, I believe, and then we had to wait like 6 months to find out if the Fonz lived, of course, and he did. But anyway, he wrecked in front of Arnold's into a big chicken stand. I remember chicken. He says, "Am I dead?" Anyway, so I believe Gavin Newsom, when Hollywood went on strike, there was a bill that came through the California legislature, and it said that they would be paid unemployment. If you go on strike, that's a voluntary thing. So traditionally, you're not paid unemployment in 49 other states, I guess. And so he decided he did not veto that bill and allowed it to enter into law. And I always thought, who could recreate your history better than Hollywood? And that's his constituency. So, and I saw some actors and members of the Actors Guild or whatever, the Hollywood crowd has been praising him some in some off-site kind of things. So I always wondered, is that where it's going to come from? Because they'll recreate him and they'll make him in some big mold, and they ring the dog and Pavlov comes running, and that's kind of the way it works. And people have very short memories, and I think their senses sometimes override their brains.
Yeah,
and I think he could be the one if they pull one out.
I did too. I was thinking him or Michelle Obama.
Yeah, I hear a lot about Michelle Obama, but I just can't see her wanting it.
Yeah, but
unless
if she
wants
did,
to get away from
I
her
think
husband.
she'd have a heck of a chance. I think Newsom. I think anybody but Biden would do better against Trump.
I do too.
I mean, it's just the idea of Gavin Newsom is.
But if Americans stay home, it's very
Well, you can stay home and mail in your vote though now.
Yeah, well, that's what I worry about these illegals, because they don't show any ID, and they get in the system, and they can get in the system. We had a bill in Tennessee that allowed to get a driving permit. They didn't call it a license, but still, you're in the system. It's just, to me, it just seems like it's just too easy for that stuff to happen.
Well, and they talk about the voter ID stuff being racist, and it's like
you got to show an ID to buy a 6-pack of beer.
I know, and you think about how racist
I'm a
is
United
that?
States Congressman, and I know everybody at TSA in Knoxville, at McGee Tyson. Every time I fly out,
you got to show an
hey,
ID.
Congressman, and I show them my ID, and they say thank you. I say thank you, guys, gals. I mean, it's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous, and we let the media pin us as racist, and all we're trying to do is be safe.
Yeah,
you don't have to
absolutely.
show anything to get in this country.
To me, it's racist saying that black people aren't smart enough to get IDs.
Yeah,
I mean, like, what you see these.
Who doesn't have a dadgum ID now?
Yeah,
I mean that's ridiculous.
Well, you see that I call them the woke whiteys. Like the white people that are just super wokies, and the type.
Yeah.
And when I hear them talk about these things, I'm like, what you're saying is actually racist. Somebody wanting an ID. It's common sense why you would want someone to have their ID when they vote. That's common sense. But to act like black people aren't smart enough.
That to me is offensive.
That is offensive. Give me a break. And, I've seen some videos where black people are presented with this and they're like, that's super offensive. They get it too. So the woke whiteys, though, they control the media, and they're pushing this crazy agenda. The weaponization right now of the DOJ, not just the DOJ, but even at the state levels, what's happened to Trump in New York. Sure. What's your view on it?
Well, obviously they're just piling on. I mean, this Fanny or whatever her name is. That's a joke. To me, that's personally offensive. That's just the way she's carried on and allowed to carry on and what she's done. And
did you see her testify by any chance?
I did, and I couldn't watch much of it. I was just like, this is too much. I mean, if Saturday Night Live had any guts anymore, they would play it on that, but they don't have any guts. I haven't watched Saturday Night Live in a while, but they you just multiply that all over the country, and that's the goal. They're gonna pin as much on Trump as they can between now and Election Day, and they hope they get a felony on him, and they're going to rush it all through court, and it's just pathetic. It's what it is. It's just we are compromised top to bottom, and what we've done as conservatives, we always try to play ball. When the Democrats come in, they just clean house. They get rid of everybody. Republicans, we say, well, let's work together, and the Democrats want you to work together when or the left does when they're in the minority. That's when they holler the most. But when they're in the majority, it's like, no, elections have consequences, and we need to remember that, and we need to turn off the television, put down the so-called editorial page, which I haven't read in a long time, and just do what's right. Remember how we got elected, and that's another thing conservatives have a poor job of doing, is supporting. We eat our own too much, and we need to. Because I'll get calls from people, and they're angry about something I did, and then when I explain it to them, they're like, "Well, I didn't hear all that. I didn't know the transportation bill was 15% transportation and 85% woke policies.
Yeah,
I just didn't know that. I mean, people did not know that, and so it just if we just do a better job, I think Republicans in Washington. What gets us in trouble, a lot of these huge bills, and they're multi-spending bills, and we need to have single-issue bills like they do in the state of Tennessee in the legislature. If it doesn't deal with that, with the caption, if it's about nursing homes, dadgum, the bill's got to be about nursing homes. It can't have pay raises in there for legislators. And so that's why they keep it honest, and that's why we have zero debt in Tennessee, and that's why we have $35 trillion of debt in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, there's so much pork in these bills. When I read them, it's just like, come on.
2,000 pages, a lot of them, and what you do, you just read down line 18, oh, there's what's in it for Tennessee. Well, I'm good with it, and then you just vote for the whole thing because of what's in there, and it's not. I say we're there. If we got to stay all night, let's stay all night. Let's work it out.
Yeah, I mean the bills. I started to read them during COVID, because we had actually had time,
Sure.
and you see some of the stuff that they put in there, and it's just so obvious. But we're talking about Gavin Newsom and what he's done, and people have short memories, but we're only as good as the people that we elect, and so I think we got to throw some of the responsibility back on American citizens, because if we're going to vote these people in, if we're not going to pay attention, if we're not going to hold people accountable, if we're not going to acknowledge that we have a problem, like first thing, if you have an addiction, you acknowledge you got, a problem. We have a lot of addictions in the country.
Yep.
And I'm going to call it the evil side, because I think there's good versus evil going on right now. I feel like the evil side knows how to really manipulate the algorithm, the social media to get people to say and do crazy things that they don't even know that they're saying or doing. And but we've got a serious problem, and like last 3 months, you're talking about keeping you up. It keeps me up too, because I'm like, how do people not see this? And the arguments that I used to have, people won't even acknowledge anymore. They're like, oh yeah, we do that. We believe that children should see pornography in elementary school. What's wrong with that? Showing those pictures. This is a parental choice. But then they want to give people vaccine mandates, and that goes out the window at that point. So, yeah.
I think we do a poor job of educating ourselves. And generally good people, though, they're too busy out working.
Yeah,
and they're taking their kids to scouts or football practice or whatever, or lacrosse or swimming, or, they're just busy. And they don't have time to go to a school board meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and a lot of these people just aren't working. They're professional protesters. They're on the government somehow, or they work for the government, and they're allowed to take time off, and they do, and they're very effective at it.
Yeah. Well, it's a messed up system. I look at Bitcoin as a way out. As it actually gives me a lot of hope. I worked on a couple Ron Paul campaigns, so when Bitcoin came out as a libertarian, I'm loving it.
Yep.
It's not exactly old school sound money like gold, but if you saw it with the vision of digital gold and where the world's going to, it has that ability. Elizabeth Warren's talking about, it's only used for nefarious acts, when the dollar is used much more for nefarious acts.
I tell you, it's the government hadn't figured out a way to control it yet. Yep. That's part of the problem, and the thugs are using it, but that means that we got to get somebody up there that's not 75 years old, dadgummit, to figure it out. I serve on an AI committee with Nancy Mace and a Democrat who's a little older than I am, and I was saying, I said, asking us to solve this thing. A lot of these guys not long ago were wearing, powder blue leisure suits and zip up dingo boots and still have an 8-track tape player in their 72 Vega. And and the guy said, I oppose that. And this Democrat said, I got a 74 Vega, or something like we were laughing because he agreed with me because, I'm 59 and I'm on the cusp of being younger than a lot of those folks up there are. And we're asked to fix this thing or regulate it. And then all we're going to do is wreck it because the people from Bitcoin don't have our ear. It's the people at the Treasury. It's the central bank. The rest of the
which they don't want it.
Hell no, they don't want it.
Bitcoin is the most trackable, though. That's the thing. Like it's the most trackable.
There's an electronic record of every transfer.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if they actually really looked and understood. I mean, yes, there's some ways to do nefarious things when they send it to multiple wallet accounts.
You know what the federal government's solution to bootleggers and criminals doing cash was? They don't print $1,000 bills anymore. They print $100 bills. Yeah. And so that was their solution. That's why there are not $1,000 bills anymore.
That's incredible. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And, because you're dealing with an antiquated group. It's when I was, when I was in the state legislature, I remember I was redoing some of the laws in Tennessee on child porn, because every instance of child porn, you would get a certain number of years added on. But if it was on one computer disk, it could have been hundreds of thousands of images or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm showing my age. I guess they don't even have computer disks anymore. But I didn't understand them, and I don't understand what's going on now.
It's a cloud now.
But you get what I'm talking about. You catch these guys with unbelievable numbers of downloads, and we're like sending out all over the country, but you can just get them on one offense. Mm-hmm. And so, and we got to figure out the technology, and we got to change with it, but not in a negative sort of way, because I believe that is the future until government figures out they get enough of those guys in there, these old codgers that are compromised into thinking the other way. Yeah, that'll shut it down.
Yeah, well,
and then it goes underground, and it does exactly what they didn't want it to do. I mean, they push it into the dark realm.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of issues like that with technology. When I do hear the debates going on in Congress, I'm like, I'm pretty big into tech, so it's obvious they don't even know what they're talking about, and it's frustrating because it's easy to manipulate somebody that has no idea what they're talking
Sure,
about.
It's funny. I wasn't involved with it in D.C., but I was in one of the buildings, and these younger folks, and they were dressed nice, were walking, and I said, "Y'all lost?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I am too. Come on, we'll be lost together." And we started talking, and they didn't realize I was a congressman. I was talking to them about what they're doing. They said, "Oh, we're lobbying on behalf of cryptocurrency. We had a little meeting up here." And I said, "Great." I said, "Well, holler at me sometime. I'd love you to come educate me on it," because I knew what was going to happen with it. Mm-hmm. And then they got out and they looked at my car and they go, "Oh, you're a congressman? Wait a minute. Yeah. We want to talk to you." And I said, "Well, great." And I said, "Let's talk about it." And we talked a little bit about it. And I told them my limited knowledge. And I said, "Look, I probably got more knowledge than a lot of these cats do up here." Mm-hmm. I said, "Y'all got to get in front of this thing, because if you don't, we'll wreck it. Yeah. We will wreck it. We will try to control it." Yeah, and then it's gone. Yeah. And so, I'm hoping that we put some things in place to not wreck it.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. Tim, I want to respect your time. I know you got a hard stop, and just know, man, we see you. There's a lot of people that see you and are supportive of you, and you're putting up the good fight, and you're one of the few.
Thank you, brother.
And so there's a lot of people that see it. I know it's probably tough, but just thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah, it is tough. I get a little peace occasionally, and I always remember what my dad did one time. We'd work the polls, and I want to leave you with this. We worked the polls all day. I think I was in the state Senate. I'm not really sure. And we were at my old house there at 8220 Bennington Drive in Knoxville. We don't live there anymore, of course. And as I like to say, we were having a traditional Italian meal. We had a Mr. Gatti's pizza. And one of those little, you remember the little color TVs? They were about this big, and they weighed like a ton. It's like a cinder block with a handle. And we were watching the election results come in, and things weren't going good for the country. And there's my dad, an old combat veteran from the Second World War, Marine. he was in the mess. He was on Peleliu and Okinawa and went to China after the war and fought the communists. And he said the blessing that night. He said, "Lord, please don't let us lose our country." And that struck me. That struck me, and I've kept that memory. I mean, I can see him in my mind's eye across that table. And I think it should be our prayer. Lord, please don't let us lose our country. But the way we don't lose our country is you don't sit on your butt on election day and let The View or some of those folks try to influence your point of view. God gave you an incredible mind. Use it. And if we don't, the country that you and I grew up in will be gone. It will be gone because the folks in Washington, there's a lot of anarchists. There's a lot of evil out there, and there's a lot of people who want to do this country in. And they're really having their way right now. So if we can get to the polls and the White House and the Congress and the state legislatures and the locals, we can turn this country around. But if we don't, it's all lost. And there is no compromise.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to part one of the interview. Now, listen to part two. We had to record this interview in two parts because Tim's schedule is so busy, but he was kind enough to come back and talk with us for part two. Part two, we talk about UFOs. We talk about corruption in government. We talk about his talk with President Biden and all the great things they discussed at the State of the Union. But stay around, listen for part two of the Tim Burchett interview on The Ed Clay Show. Tim Burchett, welcome back to part two of the podcast.
Thanks for having me back, brother. People always ask me the first time. I never get the second date usually, so thank you.
That's awesome.
I'm honored.
We got to meet your daughter Isabel today, and here she's a champion barrel racer?
Yes, sir, world champion. She is. She got run over by a horse a couple years ago in the field, and freak kind of deal, busted 5 ribs, spleen, pancreas, had a couple of surgeries, and scared me to death. And of course, I was in D.C., and I got home, and doctors did great work, and she actually won the world championship on that horse, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
And they gave her this big plastic check, and he was like, "What are we going to do with that, Dad?" I said, "Put it on the mantle."
There you go. There you go. That's awesome. Yeah, so I guess she got hurt, and then, what was it like were you nervous her getting back in there? Or?
Yeah, well, I was more nervous that she wouldn't get back in there. Kids, we always, you fall off a motorcycle. When I was a kid, you get back on it, kind of thing. And,
that's right.
And she, that was the one thing we had to keep. It was when she got home, she had to, I think, go over 30 days before they'd even let her back on the horse. And when we got home, that's the first thing she wanted to do is go see Albert, and that was the horse. They had to run her over, and it was. I got a video of it. It was just really sweet. Oh. And she's a tender spirit, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have her.
Oh, that's awesome. That's beautiful. Very beautiful. So let's talk about UFOs a little bit today.
All right.
I know
not UAPs.
Not UAPs.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that terminology. I think they threw that at us to throw us off the track.
Okay, well, UFOs then, not UAPs. You've been interested in that for a long time, right?
Yes, sir.
What kind of sparked your interest?
Well, I had unusual parents, as in they kind of turned me on to science, and everything about it. And I was in the library, or as we say in East Tennessee, the library. I was at the library. I think I rode my bike there, or Mom and Dad just dropped me off, and I'd just stay for a couple hours. I remember the librarians had books out on different things. I remember they had something on Bigfoot and all this other stuff, the paranormal, and there was a thing on UFOs, and I just picked it up and started reading about it. And, that was back before the internet and computers, and there's a lot of black and white grainy photography of crazy stuff, and it just fascinated me. And then, I read my Bible, and your Bible, our Bible, whatever. I say my Bible, but first chapter of Ezekiel, Ezekiel saw the wheel. And if you break that down, what he saw was a wheel within a wheel. And the most technologically advanced thing in those days was a wheel. And so that was all they had to compare it to. And it was it described literally a flying saucer. And it was, of course, it was it's the King James version, so it was, I think, interpreted from, I think it's Aramaic. I may be wrong. I'm sure your listeners are a lot more learned in languages than I am. I just speak fluent East Tennessee, but as you can tell, I don't. It's the only place in America where people don't speak with an accent. But in Genesis 1, God created the heavens and the earth. He created the heavens and the earth. And I go out at night, every night, because my dog, when I'm home in Knoxville. But every night I go out and look at those stars, and it's just, and to me, the light from those stars literally left that star before the time of Christ. I mean, that is the vastness of God's great universe. We are a grain of sand in 100 million beaches. I mean, that's what Earth is. And to think that we're the best that God can do, to me, is kind of cocky on our part. And I think I don't fear whatever it is, because if they, with that kind of technology, they would have done us in a long time ago, brother. So I don't fear it. And also, towards the government, all we do is cover up. Since 47, the Roswell incident is the famous one where military intelligence, which I tell people is sort of like congressional ethics, it does not exist, because, they released, if you know anything about Roswell, it was a front page article. It said saucer recovered. And that was what the military intelligence put out. And then the next day they go, oh, we made a mistake. It was a hot air balloon. That just doesn't ring true with me. And then we've had multiple incidents since then. I've talked to a pilot just less than a month ago. It was a very highly trained military pilot who literally said that this craft was 14 feet from his canopy. Now, people say, well, that's probably our stuff. Well, they wouldn't put our stuff, something that could wreck, into a $500 million piece of equipment in a highly trained American fighting man or woman. They wouldn't risk their life on that. So I just, I've gone through this thing so many times with so many different people, and I've hit so many brick walls that it kind of pushes me a little further.
Did you ever ask like Trump when he was in office what it could, hey, what's going on here?
Well, I didn't have that relationship with him then. I do have that relationship now.
Okay.
And the only way, I'm glad you brought that up, I think the only way we're ever going to get anything is somebody in the executive branch says, we're releasing this stuff. Because all of our people in office get compromised. You're wondering why so many people are leaving office right now. Some of them are leaving office because they got a better gig. Some of them are just leaving, and there's things going on in their lives, and they've been told, either get out or we're going to disclose this, or they're tired of being owned, and they just can't take it anymore. Their conscience has finally got to them. So there's a lot going on within that, and I think Trump is one of those that just never was really into it. I know Clinton's people were, but I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw the dome off the Capitol. But I was sort of in the last couple of years of the Trump administration, so I came into Congress then, and it just, it takes you 2 years to find the restroom in D.C., so it's a big, lot of moving parts, and I've since talked to some of his top people that he is very interested in it, and he would like to blow the lid off of it.
Okay, that's great.
So long answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just didn't think I could just yes or no you on that.
No, that's good, actually. I mean, because the president would know, obviously. Well, you would think he would.
You would think he would, but he wouldn't, because you have the military-industrial complex. I prefer to call them the war pimps. They don't like that, and I'm glad. They have, we audit them every year, and they've never passed an audit in the history of auditing the Pentagon, and yet they've misplaced over $500 billion in assets. That means tanks, that means Jeeps, that means bullets, pencils, whatever. We don't know where it is. They are not saying where it is. And then how did we punish them this last time? We gave them $20 billion additional dollars in the NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which had a bunch of other garbage in it. But on top of that, and it's a crooked game up here, brother.
Yeah.
And it's the uniparty. It's not, I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. I'm not angry about it, but there is a lot a lot to be said bad about the Democrat Party, but there's a lot to be said about the Republican Party. And when the doors are closed, they don't see black or white, the color of skin. All they see is green, color of money. And that's what runs the deal. And that's the whole crooked end of it. Case in point, we go to Ukraine. We gave them our missile defense system. I'm not for any of that. It's not our war, but we had to replenish our missile defense system. So who owns stock in that missile defense system? People in both parties on that committee that were involved in that decision making. That was public knowledge, public record. I mean, it was publicly made available because that's what the law says. Is it wrong? Yes. Is it legal? Yes, but that doesn't make it right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
I'm sorry again, another long answer. I think I've had too much caffeine.
That's okay. Hey, all hyped up on that sugar and caffeine.
I'm jacked up on Mountain Dew.
That's right. What do you think about so you're talking about Congress being able to pick the stocks that they're voting on. Obviously, there's a conflict of interest. It's obvious. When you're having these conversations with them, because there's been a lot of pressure to vote, to where they can't do that. You look at like Nancy Pelosi, actually a lot of different members, they're making a lot of money in the stock market.
Pelosi's not even in the top 10.
No.
There's a website, something like Whales or something on Twitter. You'll have to find it. I get it, but it lists curious trades and things that go on, and it has a listing of, there's about 50 or 60 of us on there.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually tie your stock trades to the politicians now.
Oh, 100%.
If you want insider trading, go ahead and just follow that along.
There's a couple of mutual funds that follow that.
Really?
Oh yeah, they used to follow Berkshire Hathaway, and now they follow members of Congress.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just seems obviously wrong, but
Oh, it's crooked as a dog's leg, brother.
Yeah.
I have my $7,000 portfolio is in a mutual fund my buddy Tommy Siler manages very well. It's my daughter's college education.
That's good. That's good. The UFO committee, you were mentioning it a little earlier. What's going on with that?
Well, it's under the guise of I serve on 3 committees, and it's on one of those committees, and so what we do is, currently we're looking at, Hunter Biden and all this other stuff, but it's under the auspices of that committee. So we oversight is, and I always forget the name for some reason. It's the hottest committee pretty much on Capitol Hill. But Chairman Comer, who's a friend of mine, he has to authorize it, and that's what happened the last time. And the Speaker authorized it, and really it's just the chairman. I think they sort of, well, let Burchett do this thing. It ain't going nowhere, And then it was the largest attended committee meeting in maybe the last. I talked to some old time reporters, and they says they brought probably 15 or so years. They'd never seen anything. They had over 1,000 people. They had to open up another room so people could view it. I was on Fox that morning, and I left my office. They send a car for you, and I left my office. I walked outside. It was before 5 o'clock. It was around 4:30 in the morning, and people were they were already lined up outside to get in the building.
Wow!
And so it's just these people travel from all over the country, so it's a huge undertaking. Now we've written a letter, a group of us have, to the chairman and the speaker to get what's called a select committee. If we get a select committee, then we'd have subpoena power, and we could really go after some stuff. Maybe hire somebody. There's talk of bringing Grush in, the guy who said that there's bodies and all this other stuff, and craft retrieval. I mean, the CIA has said they have a craft retrieval. I mean, they've said that. That's been disclosed. That's not earth shattering here. I mean, that's not news, but it's been disclosed. Craft retrieval. Now, what are they retrieving? That's the question. And so, there's it's a complicated process. There's a funding issue involved, and if we don't, though, the Speaker Johnson, who's a friend of mine, he came into Knoxville for me for a little event, and I wanted he had me backstage, and it was just me and him talking, and he gave me plenty of time. I always they give you 30, I take 5 because their time's valuable, and I want them to know that I value that. It's a good trick out there. If any of y'all ever have to meet with some big shots, they dig that because they'll usually give you the full time, but if you just need that little bit, it makes them feel that much more valuable. And I talked to him about that. I said, look, they'd like to have another committee meeting. He said, he wrote it down. He's a real, he's a lawyer, but he's a very decent man. And he wrote it down because it meant so much to him to make him remember to do it, and his staff. And he told his staff. So I'm sure we could get another hearing, but the select committee would be the one that could really go after some of this stuff. Again, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot because this thing is so compartmentalized. And I live in, like I said, I live in Knoxville, and that's in East Tennessee, and it backs up to Oak Ridge. And that's where they built the bomb. They created compartmentalization. Literally a couple of thousand people there, brother, and during the Second World War, and maybe a half a dozen people knew that they were working on an atomic bomb. Wow. I talked to, I get elected by knocking on doors, and I would talk to somebody of, if they were of my parents, both my parents are in heaven, but back when they were alive, they would, if they were somebody in that age group, I'd find out if they were in the war or not, or what branch. And I remember talking to this one guy, he was putting his American flag out. I said, well, I didn't serve. And he kind of ducked his head a little. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I figured it might have been 4F. He goes, I worked at Oak Ridge. And I said, brother, if my dad was here, he would hug your neck. I said, because he was on Okinawa, and he'd fought Peleliu. He's in the Marine Corps, and they were getting ready to go to mainland Japan. He said they dropped the bomb, and it was over. And he said, I said, what y'all did probably saved my dad's life. And he said, the funny thing, Tim, he said, my wife worked there same time, and we did not know what each did. That is compartmentalization, and that is what we've got. And since 1947, you figure somebody who knew about Roswell had put it into a department over here or something, or that all those people are dead. And so, that's the best compartmentalization you can have. And so whatever we have is passed down the line. There's so few people that actually know. Presidents don't know. And, not Biden, but Chuck Schumer, he had an amendment on the bill. I had one too on disclosure. And his, mine was 2 pages. His was about 60. But they basically did the same thing. But they didn't even bring my amendment up. That's how much power these people have. They killed his amendment. On the floor, they killed Chuck Schumer's amendment. Wow. So, and he went on.
The military-industrial complex is hiding it.
Yes.
Well, what do you think the motives of hiding it are?
Well, money, power.
They have some
control,
kind of crazy technology.
Technology. Imagine if now if you go to the Tic Tac videos. I'm sorry. Yeah, Tic Tac. Wait, let me make sure I got it right. TikTok. TikTok is the Chinese communist.
That's
deal.
right.
Tic Tac is the candy.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Tic Tac. Okay. So the Tic Tac candy. That was what these UFOs look like. If you'll Google that and watch the videos, and you can hear the pilots, and those were one of the pilots was who testified in our committee, and they talk about this thing, and there's no, and you can watch it, and there's no heat signature. There's no propulsion. There's no anything. And could you imagine having that much energy in one little contained area? And they did the math for me. Some guys did the math for me. It was just the amount of energy that, let's say what we would consider, nuclear or oil or coal based. It was just enormous. The amount of power that this thing would have had to be able to move at these speeds, at that rate of speed, at that volume, and no heat signature. Could you imagine? We could heat our homes in the winter and cool them in the summer. The Pentagon would not be getting us in these awful wars, getting our boys and girls killed over a barrel of oil. Environmental issues would end right then.
Yeah.
We'd put them all out of business. And that's one component of it. And two, and I'm a motorcycle guy. Well, say I took one of my newer bikes back to say I don't have one, but say I had a brand new Harley, and I took it back to the people that came over on the Mayflower. They'd have a bright, shiny object. They could polish it. They might get it started. They'd never be able to pump the tires up. They couldn't even make the fuel to run it. The alcohol wouldn't burn in it. They couldn't adjust the valves. They wouldn't know how to get the heads off. They wouldn't understand any of it. But fast forward now, if we were to get a UFO or something of that capacity of being able to travel that speed, light years, what have you, what could we do with it? We could probably polish it, try to dent it, pour acid on it, try to melt it. You know, we would. And so there's that component of it too. But and so, you know, I had a nice conversation with a man who was an admiral in the Navy. And I had another conversation. These two, oddly enough, fit together. I was with a group of congressional members, and it was in a non-secure setting, so I can talk about both of these. Both of them were not in a secure setting. One was in my office, and one was at a meeting off campus. And they were talking about how these were having reports that some of our submarines can do pretty substantial speed, but nothing like this. These things were moving at hundreds of miles an hour. They're half the size of half a football field under the water, and they were picking them up on sonar. And then I'm meeting with an admiral, and he's telling me these hot spots. There's 5 or 6 hot spots around the world, and a lot of them are over deep water. So that leads some people to think that there's some sort of bases that are in deep water. You know, you have the Mariana Trench. I believe it may be a mile deep or deeper. And we honestly know more about the surface of the moon than we do the surface of the ocean floor. So there's some thoughts that maybe there's something there, a type of base, maybe something, I don't know. That's just a theory that's out there. But it's pretty cool when an admiral comes in and tells me that we're not alone. This isn't some buddy of mine down at Toddy's Backdoor Tavern on his sixth PBR, you know, telling me that there's something out there. This is a professional man who has a whole career in his involvement. And some other stuff he told me I'm not at liberty to talk about, but it was very substantial.
Yeah. No, I believe it. I've gotten some similar stories from some people I respect, and they're like, no, this is the real deal. And you know, what's interesting too, my understanding is like patents for like perpetual motion, and the patent office knocks them down. So if you have anything that messes with the, you know, like say the oil and gas industry that could wipe it out, they won't even let your patents go through, and they kindly shut you down. Yeah,
and there's several, and there's some conspiracy theories, but you know, you figure that if they could ever crack that hydrogen molecule in a cheap, efficient way, you know, just walk down here in Knoxville, it's the Tennessee River, just get you a gallon of water.
That's right.
And run it. And, you know, run it through, it'd be internal combustion. It'd just crack that it'd just pull the hydrogen out and the oxygen and burn it. And so, yeah, I think there's something to be said for that, because oil industry would just, outside of fuel, I mean, you have to have oil for everything, you know, for plastics, everything else. But it would just, I think it would destroy that industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's been a lot of things out there that have been kind of shelved because it would have, you know, affect the, you know, the dollars, the greenbacks. But what do you think about Antarctica? I've been hearing some interesting things about Antarctica. Do you know anything about that? Yeah,
I do. Again, I've been told some things that maybe I'm not at liberty to talk about. I'll talk about what I do know. They're talking about Admiral Byrd went up there with a big expedition, and there was his diary. I'd warned people about that. His diary was rewritten, I think, by somebody. You know, if you don't see it with your own 2 eyes and don't put your hands on it, I'd be very, very cautious about it. And of course, the Nazis had a lot of interest in Antarctica, and there's an area of Antarctica where you're literally you have to have permission from other countries to go visit. You know, it's a coalition kind of thing, and there's I think there's a lot of untapped knowledge up there, and I think at one time it was not frozen. Obviously, there's Chinese maps that show land. I'm fascinated at the thought of pyramids up there and all that, but it's a huge amount of area, and that would be ideal for if if I was something from another world or something that was been on this world for a long time and didn't want anybody messing with me, that'd be the place to be.
Yeah. No, I mean, UFOs just, 10 years ago was considered crazy. I think now it's more mainstream. Over while we were dealing with COVID, there were some official things that were released, and people didn't even seem to really bat an eye. Like, oh yeah, well, it's kind of shows you how much it's changed. We were mentioning Joe Rogan earlier. He's been talking about this and having great guests on for years going over this. I mean, what do you think about? Would society be able to handle it?
Yeah, would they be able to handle it? Well, that's not the job of government. A good friend of mine who's a Democrat from Florida, he told me the other day, we were talking, and we had a press conference. Jared Moskowitz is his name, and he's an interesting guy, and he's super, super smart, and he's an attorney. And he was saying, it's not the government's job to decide if I can handle something or not. And to think that would wreck religious beliefs. I'm a born-again Christian. I'm not a good one. I'm on the forgiving end of it, dude. I know when a bunch of y'all get to heaven, you're going to look over in the corner and they'll see me. Man, we must have lowered our standards. Let Burchett in up here. But I have no problem with, I have no problem with any other lives out there or any other thing. It's, I just don't have a problem with that. I think the vastness of this universe is infinity is a long way, brother.
Yeah, and you think if your faith is strong, what does it matter?
What's it matter? It does not matter. People say, "Well, what about this? What about this?" And I say, "It doesn't matter. That's why I have faith." They say, "Well, you haven't seen God," and I say, "Well, I haven't seen oxygen. Doesn't mean I'm going to quit breathing."
Right.
Yeah. So I just that's kind of an oversimplification, but
that's what it is.
I just think it's it just shows another just more vast. If you're on your computer or whatever, like I am, and I always click on like when they find like a new lizard in a cave or something, and ultimately it's kind of the Bigfoot thing, a bunch of something's going to pop up, but it's not that, but it's just, and so I just every week there's a new animal species that's found somewhere, and it's not always out in the middle of the jungle somewhere. Some of it is in fairly civilized areas. And they thought this thing was extinct or whatever, and it's usually something small. It's a worm, it's a lizard, it's a different kind of mouse or rat or something, or a monkey. But it's still, just up into 1970, we I think down in New Guinea, or is it New Guinea, they found a new tribe. And of course, off the coast of Madagascar, they found the coelacanth, which is supposed to have been extinct 50 million years. So I dig all that stuff, and it just kind of follows me around.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I wouldn't be scared of it at all. I mean, whatever happens, happens. If you got your faith, I think it's there's a lot of things in the Bible that maybe make more sense if that comes true.
Yeah,
who knows?
I mean, there's a lot of things in the Bible I do not. In the Book of Revelation is like, are these folks on acid or what? I don't get it. I don't get it. I think a lot of it has to do with the Aramaic to King James translation, possibly. But when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, they matched a lot of it up, and it turned out it was pretty much spot on.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually kind of glad we're almost at that point where the stuff's coming out. I mean, and that's the thing about 2024 into the future. Like, I think everything is going to be a lot more open. These things can't be hidden. You look at like RFK running for president right now, and put yourself in RFK's brain. Like his dad was assassinated, his uncle was assassinated. I mean, it's a different view of conspiracy and government.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, he claims to know who the guy was that actually, they said Sirhan was shot him, which he probably was one of them. But, it's just not, like I said, unless you saw it with your own two eyes, I don't buy it. There's a lot of things out there that are just too easy. We for so long, we just take whatever the government says and we believe it.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it's gone for forever. Now it's coming up.
I'll give you a case in point. I was on Unknown Aliens, or Ancient Aliens, and they what they do is they record you. They'll come in there and they'll record you for an hour, man, and then and of course I'm all over the board, so I'm on half a dozen episodes, and so I never even watched it. And I was in Nashville, of all things, over at the state capitol visiting with some legislators, and a guy called me, and he said, he always calls me Timbo. Hey, Timbo. I said, yeah. And he said, I just saw you on Ancient Aliens. And I thought, oh, here it comes. He's going to say, oh, were you probed or something? Something. And I said, hey, I got to tell you a little story. And he goes, and he'd been in the Navy. I think it was in about 1959, and he was on a ship, and I do this a lot. If you ask him what time it is, he'd tell you how to make the clock. But he gave me the whole scenario. Long story short, they're out there, and something just comes out of the sky and just hovers right there. And he goes, Timbo, he said, if that thing was a block, it was 2 blocks. He said it was big. And then he said it had, and he described it to me, the classic saucer shape, and it said it had like a dome on the top of it, and there was slits up there, and you could see light back behind it as a viewing kind of tower thing. And he said that thing, he said it didn't make a noise, no wind, no anything, and he said it just went straight up, just like that. No,
interesting.
No nothing. No noise, no anything, no turbulence, and they were just like, "What the heck was that?"
Yeah.
And then he said they got back to shore, and sure enough, the men in suits came on with suitcase. They had their attachés and whatever, and they were in suits. I guess we called them Men in Black, but they were probably Secret Service or some sort of military. And they said, "You didn't see anything. If we ever hear you talking about this, you'll go to Leavenworth."
Oh wow!
And they never talked about it.
Wow.
And the interesting thing about that story, when he was telling me, he's an older guy, and he was yelling at his wife, and he was saying, "Hey, baby, what?" And he what ship was on? And she'd say it, and they said, "What? That was?" And he said, 58 or 59. He said, "It's 59, honey." And then he would relay that back to me, and it was he painted a pretty clear picture. And you fast forward that, I get a call from a guy who was a former aviator who was out fishing, I believe in the Gulf, and he said this craft, he described it very similar, the color, everything of this, comes by, and 2 jets were either chasing or just trailing it. And, they just kind of, and then they said, "Did you just see that?" It's like, and the craft was very similar. And I've heard that story, similar type situations. And, and now there's this Arrow report out that this bigwig bureaucrat in Washington says that, Congress is being led, it's a circular story. It's one story that just keeps going around. It's not one story. It's hundreds, if not thousands of stories. And that's the trick in the media. They tell you a lie often enough, you start to believe it. And that's the trick with these people. And they want to play us down in Congress. I got news for them. It's not just me. I might have lit the match, but I was told by a guy in Trump's administration, a former member, about as close as you can get to Trump. He said, "Brother, you need to get some bodies around you. You have kicked the hornet's nest on this one."
Oh wow!
And but you think about it, you're talking about upsetting the whole apple cart.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would all these people do if we didn't have wars? What if this whole world was united? They'd be out of business.
Yeah. No, it's very, very true. What was it? Was it Truman that said, the military-industrial complex was the thing that we had to look at?
Actually, Eisenhower.
Eisenhower, yeah. Eisenhower.
Ike said that, and he was military.
Yeah.
It was about a 5-minute speech, but it was he was right. And there's reports that he'd been briefed. And there's all kinds of stuff out there, and I've never been able to prove any of it. And there's a lot out there. And I want to warn people about something, too. I get a lot of reports, and I get a lot of people that come into my office, kind of deep throat thing. I've met people in the hallway, have said, hey, I want to tell you about something. And you got to be real careful because they put up, they call them white flags. These people actually believe what they're saying is true. They've been shown something or done something or experienced something, but it's not accurate. And they're not telling a lie purposefully, but they're trying to get us off the trail. And that's why I'm very cautious. I get books from people and pictures and firsthand accounts, and I'm very cautious about ever sharing those publicly.
Yeah,
because they are they're false.
Yeah.
And there's people that have been trained in the government, I'm convinced, that have been put in labs and positions that are given false information, so they will come back with a false conclusion, and then it will be easily. It won't be easily defensible, and then it will put a cloud over the entire movement and could hurt us. So
yeah.
I'm very cautious about that. I let it kind of play out.
Well, that kind of happened with COVID because, you had Fauci and NIH and Francis Collins.
Sure.
If you think about NIH, they have about a $45 billion a year budget.
That we know of.
Fauci had been head of his department since like 1984.
Right.
And every single year he has this big budget. Now his wasn't the full $45 billion. It was, less, but it's still a big budget. Think about how many favors you would have. If every year for almost 40 years you had billions of dollars to give away. And so a pandemic happens and you're the one controlling the money to the universities, to the researchers, to all these different things.
To the drug companies that could have a cure for something, and they have a cure for it. And you could get ahead of the investing. You could tell your buddies to invest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Congress 101.
Yeah. I mean, and then they, for COVID, they throw the smoke screen. For instance, they said, if you don't think that, or if you think that it came from a lab in Wuhan, you're a racist.
Yep.
If you don't want to take the vaccine, you just want to kill people.
Right.
And that was what they did. With that.
Can I tell you something that happened to me? I'll write about it in my book if I ever write the book. But I don't know if anybody ever buy it or believe it. But I'm on a schedule every morning. I'm a very habit type person. I sleep in my office. It's too expensive and it's not safe in D.C. And so I go down and take a shower in the morning at the same time. Well, I'm in there. I'm brushing my teeth at the sink. It's just like in a prison or whatever, but it happens to be in the gym in Congress. And I'm next to a member who's on the Intelligence Committee. And he says, Burchett? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I've been watching you. He said, oh, yeah? And he says, yeah, you seem like you know what's going on. And I said, well, thank you. And he said, why is that? And I said, well, 16 years in the legislature. I was 8 years county mayor. I know I'm not going to be called to the White House to negotiate a trade deal with North Korea my first couple of years. And he laughed, and he was brushing his teeth or something. He said, you following this flu bug out there, this Wuhan virus thing? I said, or COVID or whatever they were calling it at that time. I can't remember. And I said, yes, sir. It's something out of China, I think. He goes, yeah, it's at the Wuhan lab, out of Wuhan. And I said, oh, okay, that's in China, right? And he said, yeah. And then he said, you know what else is in Wuhan? I said, no, sir. And I thought, well, you're getting ready to tell me. And he said, yeah, their chemical warfare lab is there. I go, really? And he said, you know what the biggest problem they have in China right now? And I said, no, sir, I don't. And he said, people are living too long. And I read a report, maybe it was up to the 70s, the Chinese, they were going to there was a high-level talk of dropping an atomic bomb on their own people just to see what would happen.
Whoa.
And, they have very little regard. My daddy fought in the Pacific, in the Marine Corps, all the way across. He went to China and fought the communists over there for a short while. And he talked about they didn't care about sacrifice. They'd move a mountain. Everybody just line up and start handing dirt down to the next person, rock, whatever. They moved mountains. They moved factories during the war. The Japanese were coming in. They just take it. They just piece bolt by bolt, and they just start walking it back across the a mountain range. I mean, they do not care. They do not value life like we do.
Right.
The higher ups value themselves,
Sure.
but they don't value the peasants. And they're in such a, they haven't, their technology for those poor folks hasn't, increased since the Dark Ages probably. So, and he just goes, yeah, they're living too long. And he goes, that was the last thing he said. And he was on, I believe he was on the Intelligence Committee, one of the higher ups. And I thought, it was just almost a surreal moment. And then that stuck in my head. And that was a long time before.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who Fauci was.
Right.
Of course, he was in. Remember when the AIDS thing hit? It was his deal. And a lot of the gay folks still do not care for him.
Yeah, well, he was especially the enemy of the gays then. With what he did with the AZT, which was, in my opinion, should be criminal. A lot of the stuff that went on during the pandemic, to me was criminal because, it's one of those things that they knew what they were saying wasn't true, but it was, they would say just enough to get people to do something.
Yeah.
And
because I'm not a medical professional. And, my buddy Rand Paul, he wears them out.
Yeah,
and I dig that. He's a good dude. And he's usually one step ahead of everybody else in that line of thinking. And I dig that about him.
Yeah, well, he broke it down because the NIH was funding EcoHealth Alliance.
Right.
And EcoHealth Alliance was funding the Wuhan lab. And that was after Obama had said no more, funding for gain of function. So they had the workaround. And, they try to cover that up too. If you look at the emails, I mean, it was obvious. Obviously. It was a cover up. And, people just went along with it. And, they say, that you look at the past, like how did Nazi Germany get to a certain point, and how would people just conform? And
it's that classic boiling frog. You put a frog in a boiling pot of water and it'll jump out, but you put it in a cold pot of water and you just gradually turn it up. And we're just so used to being fed, and we trust people and our government, and those days are gone. We don't need to trust me. We don't need to trust our government.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, it's this UFO thing. It's just beyond me that they are allowed to spend tens of millions of dollars on this thing. They had Harry Reid had funded something. I think it was around $20 million. Lou Elizondo's a buddy of mine. They said they weren't doing it, and then and they said he didn't work for them. And he produces a pay stub, and then they check the audit, and sure enough, it's there. One more thing. I know we get off the UFO topic, but I tell you how odd this is. I've had people come to see me, and they won't come see me inside my office.
Interesting.
I met with a couple of guys one time, there's 3 people in the meeting, and the guy introduced the other guy, and they were showing me some stuff and explaining some stuff to me. I said, now, who's that? And they said, he's not here. So, I don't know if they were a spook or what, but they, and I've had Capitol Police come see me and say, hey, somebody was asking about you, but they didn't want to come in the building, and they told me the name, and I say, oh. And, it was somebody that's in this. And another time, these guys called and said they wanted to meet with me. And I said, well, that'd be great. I said, just have Denise, we'll get Denise to call you and set something up. And they said, well, wait a minute, we don't want to come by the office. And I said, well, where do you want to meet? And I said, how about your house? And I said, that's back in Tennessee. And they said, okay. And on Saturday, they showed up.
Wow.
And they, I remember when they pulled up in front of the house, it was the dangest thing. I remember I had 4 Dr. Peppers. Thank goodness there's, I think, 3 of them and 1 of me. Whatever, it was 4 or 5 of them. Anyway, and they were well known. And they said, you care if we hook something up to your television? And I was like, well, sure, because I didn't. My daughter wasn't there. I thought, dadgum, if y'all don't, she was at a horse show, I think, out of town. I said, if y'all don't get that thing hooked back up, I'll be without TV all weekend because I'm not going to know how to figure out. But they hooked it back, they hooked it up, and then they started showing me stuff. And, and I was like, and you know that goes back to my white flag. I have to be very careful, but I had already checked these guys out ahead of time, and they were legit. And it was remarkable. I mean, it was just that's the kind of thing that needs to be seen.
Well, what were they showing? If you can say,
well, craft, and that were just and they were scientists. They were not like. And I don't know your background. I just say like me and you were regular folks, and their IQs were through the roof. But they started talking about G forces, and one of them was started talking about thermodynamics, and it was just, and I was like, okay, hold on for a second. Let me see if I understand this. And they were really kind to me because they knew, you know, I was the one shot they had at getting. And that sort of helped light the flame on this thing, because it really wouldn't have happened. All this wouldn't have happened. You and I wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. It hadn't have been for the center of all media, TMZ. You know, TMZ, the crazy show on television that, you know, they get the actors and stuff and catch them and say something funny.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a really cool show. I used to watch it when I was younger, and now I'm too tired to, you know, watch anything. I hit the bed, I'm asleep. But their reporter grabbed me and asked me about the report that was coming out, and I said that Trump had ordered, and it was then under Biden. And I said that thing will be so redacted. And he goes, "Oh man, it's going to be the greatest report ever. It's going to have everything." And I said, "No, it won't. It'll be redacted. It'll look like somebody shot it with a 12 gauge." And then I said those magic words. I said, more people will believe in UFOs than believe in Congress. I ended up putting that on a T-shirt, and I sell it on my website.
Oh, nice.
And people all over the world buy this crazy thing because I said it right there on TMZ. But if they hadn't have done that, I would have never had the contact with all these other people that, you know, the Lou Elizondos, all those guys out there, George Knapp, all of them. I mean, you know, I became friends with them, and the people you see that break the huge stories and things, and it just was a fluke kind of thing that I fell into it. But it's amazing to me the amount of friction and the opposition I get from the alphabet agencies. You know, we that first hearing where we had the 3 people up there, that we had 12 that we you know, it was going to be like a big cattle call, which I really don't like, because you have people contradicting, and somebody doesn't get to say what they really want to get to say, and that amount, you know, you don't have that much time, and then and they just kept peeling off. And they'd say, one guy said, well, I'd gotten a call from somebody at some NASA type deal or something. They said I couldn't do it. I don't know. NASA said they didn't do it. I don't know. But it just kept peeling off. And then I was left with these 3 guys, and they were dynamite. And the beautiful thing about it was I asked a few questions, but I wanted to make sure everybody, because I've been in this thing my whole life. I mean, I knew the answers before they. When people would say, "Do we have this? Have you seen this?" And because these guys were actually, they're friends of mine now, but we talked to them prior and interviewed them a little bit,
sure,
to make sure we knew what we were getting into, and I was able to pass questions to friends on both sides of the aisle, and some of them, unbeknownst to them, with their staffers were asking them questions, and it was just beautiful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad it's finally, you know, getting pushed out there, and let's see if Trump gets elected, it should help that if he really wants to expose things. I think
it's in his nature.
It is, especially at this point. I mean, I wasn't a big Trump guy, and but the point I'm at now is it's undeniable how unfair they're treating him, and you know, it's actually made me like him more, because they're
this country loves a martyr.
Yeah,
this country
they're being
loves
the bullies.
A martyr.
It's awful. I mean, it's obvious. And, you know, they were talking about the black community supporting him because of that. They've
been mistreated for hundreds of years in the court system, and that's undeniable. Yeah. And when he said it, it ticked them all off. It ticked the white liberals off. It didn't tick black folks. I never heard one black person say that's not true.
No, it's the woke whiteys. The woke, that's what I like to call them, the woke whiteys. But they're the ones screaming the loudest over this stuff. And, you know, when I hear them talk, like, for instance, voter ID, that they sound racist to me when
Yeah.
they say black people aren't smart enough to have an ID. That's outrageous.
You got to show an ID to buy a 6-pack of beer.
Exactly.
And you know, I fly every week. I have to show my ID. They all know who I am, but I still have to show that ID. And sometimes I'll go into places where, you know, if I have to cash a check or I don't cash checks, and nobody hardly does that anymore. But if you go somewhere and your credit card, you got any ID?
Yeah,
sure.
Of course, you got to show it, and everybody has an ID. I mean, it's ridiculous, you know, and they try to virtue signal, acting like, well, the marginalized people don't. They don't know. Everybody has an ID, and it's just about big picture for the Democrat Party getting votes. They want to
sure. That's what the illegal immigration thing's about. It's about mail-in ballots. You don't show an ID when you got a mail-in ballot. You've got people giving out Social Security or selling Social Security cards and IDs all over the country. They were doing it overseas at our outside of our embassies before Afghanistan fell. And you know, it's a constant thing. It's fraud and it's abuse, but people will do anything they can to stay in power.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Is, you know, people will do anything and they push as hard as they can, and it's not about doing what's right for the people. You know, that's, you know, I know you're about doing what's right for the people. There's a number of other ones, but it's not the majority, at least from what I can see. You know, you were last week talking to President Biden as he was walking out for the State of the Union. You got a lot of time with him. What did you talk about?
Chevy Corvettes. I always, when I talk to people, I learned this when I was in the legislature. I remember I met at the Tennessee Waltz, Brooks and Dunn, Kix Brooks and Ronnie Dunn, and they were both very super nice. And which most of these folks, the older country, I don't know anything about these newer country music guys, but I did that with Kid Rock one time. I met him, and his name's Bobby, actually. I met him a couple of times, and the next time I met him, he asked me about an old Harley Panhead that I'd had, and I found out that a lot of times these famous people, you're so tired of people, you know, like Kid Rock. I was watching him backstage, and our third child was conceived to your, you know, whatever album or something, you know. Just, I mean, I get tired of that stuff, man. He'd want to talk about motorcycles,
right?
And we talked about motorcycles, and my buddy Steve Cropper, who still lives here in Nashville, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He co-wrote Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. And he told me he met he used to hang out with Elvis. He was on some of his earlier songs, a studio musician at Stax Records, and then I guess Sun or whatever. And he's one of the best guitar players in the world. And he told me about meeting Elvis, you know, and hanging out with him at Graceland in Memphis. And he said that, you know, he'd come up behind you and hit you one time, you know, where you're shooting, and everybody'd laugh, you know. Hit you again, just keep doing it, you know. And it was just is because they've been just so insulated, and they just thought that was the norm. Mm-hmm. And these guys crave to talk about stuff that's not the norm, and so, you know, and they want to talk about stuff they're interested in. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I knew the president liked Corvettes. I knew he liked peppermint chocolate chip ice cream, and my little girl Isabel, we go to the Mexon, the Mexican restaurant that's attached to the Exxon there near the house, and went there last night. And there's a Baskin Robbins over there, and sometimes she'll get that. And I was talking to him about that, and then I said, I told him about a date I'd had in 1980. My brother's 72 Corvette had a 350, and I told him it'd pass everything but a gas station, and peeling out in Brunswick Billiards parking lot. And, you know, it was just crazy. And then I was just trying to see how long I could talk to him. And I did. And I beat my record from the year prior. And then he comes back, though. He comes back and he goes, he says, you know, he goes, you know, Tim, those new Corvettes do 0 to 60. And here's this awkward pause. And he puts his hand on his mouth and he says, in 1 second. And I thought, 1 second, that'd pull your eyeball out your ear hole. You know, you couldn't do that. But anyway, he said, but they're electric or something, and I don't know. It just, and I just was sitting there thinking how surreal this moment is. And then Of course, I go from anger to pity with him because I don't think he's mentally well. I don't think his cognizant level is what we need in a commander-in-chief. And I really don't. I think he is in very bad shape. And everybody says, you got to get him out of there. And I thought, no, we don't either. Kamala Harris would be incredibly worse.
Yeah, well, it's obvious that he's not running the show, though, right? I mean, there's got to be his cabinet's running it, the people behind him are running it. But
Obama's got people in place. And something that scares me about that, just the Marxist mentality, the hatred of what I consider traditional America and what the vast majority does, but they're too busy working to have, dealing with it. And that's what happens on election day. Everybody says they steal these elections. I said, well, let's put enough points on the board, so they can't steal it. That's what we've got to do. Because 15% of the population votes. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Because with all these computers, they can tell. As I was told, in a couple of these presidential elections, you could have had a couple of postmasters in Illinois could have decided the presidential election.
Interesting.
And that to me is scary.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And
but you keep giving people stuff for free, and they'll vote for you.
Yeah, I mean, they come out with all these new plans. I think at this point, though, it's so obvious.
Oh,
I mean, and what's interesting,
free school the loan, doing away with the loan, and just passing it on to you and me.
Well, if you look at like the media right now, though, when they're talking about Biden, now they're saying that Trump is the one that's losing his memory and
they're flipping it. They always accuse you of what they're guilty of.
It's just wild.
That's an old trick, and I just in the lamestream media. I mean, honestly, brother, they got so much invested in this president. They got to pursue that, and that's what they do. And they are not. I just hope the American public isn't buying it. I really do. But the drastic moves he's making right now, he's playing ball with Hamas over in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because the largest Middle Eastern / Muslim community outside of the Middle East is Dearborn, Michigan. And
really?
So Michigan's a battleground state.
Interesting.
So he's going to throw everything he can at, and forget what they did when they rolled into Israel and massacred all those Jews. They just forget that, and so it's not all what it seems. It's not about feeding children and taking care of folks. It's just political.
It's all politics.
It's all politics.
I mean, I know it's obvious to you and I, but you think it's obvious to the average American how biased the media is right now? The mainstream, called the lamestream media, is towards just differing non-woke views.
Yeah, but I don't watch it. I don't watch. Burchett, did you see what was on Fox? I was on CNN this morning at 5:30, and they'll. I like going on early because a lot of these stations will take it and just put you on all day, spread you out all over there. And I've been on Fox and Newsmax is coming on huge right now. I'm on there a bunch. OAN, all these other stations and stuff. And honestly, I never watch them. Mm-hmm. I never watch them. I'll Google my name occasionally when somebody will say, "Hey, Burchett, I heard you on such and such," and I'll say, "Well," and I'll go back and watch it because I was on 3 different networks yesterday afternoon.
Wow.
When I flew in from D.C. back in Knoxville, and I do it set up in my office there with my phone, and so I don't watch it, but then when I do, on all sides of it, I can see just the biased nature. And
Fox and CNN. Right?
Yeah, oh yeah,
it's just like
absolutely,
both.
absolutely.
Exactly.
But that's their market.
Yeah.
They're not in business. It's not public television. When 2 people watch it, they're still going to get that fat check from the government. No, they got to sell ads. Yeah. And they gotta, and they have an agenda.
That's why podcasts,
honestly, I'd rather get more coverage on Fox than I would on CNN,
of course,
or Newsmax than CNN or something like that. But I go on there because I like to fight. Just be honest with you, and I know I'm going to get into a fight because they don't agree with most of the time. This morning it was very kind, and occasionally I'll get on one, and then I'll tick them. I was banned from Matt Gaetz told me he said, you're banned from CNN. I go, hey, I was wondering why they hadn't called me. I said, what happened? He said, well, I have a Christmas party and it's 15 minutes long because I figure, you go to a Christmas party, you sit there and you got your drink and your shrimp cocktail or whatever, and you got to talk to some knucklehead and you're tired of it. I don't want to talk anymore. And 15 minutes is about all you got. But this year I went 16 minutes because we couldn't cram it all in. And I was seeing, and CNN was asking me about it they do this thing every Wednesday morning. They do a breakfast with Burchett, they called it. It was it was a lot. We go back and forth on all the issues of the day. And they asked me about my Christmas party. And I said, y'all are invited. I said, I know I probably won't see most of y'all in heaven, but you're still invited. And, I'm just joking. Right. And apparently that ticked them off.
Okay.
And because it was kind of funny. I had my buddy Jared Moskowitz was my Santa Claus, and the reporter said, your Santa Claus is Jewish, don't you, Congressman? And I said, dude, my Savior's Jewish. If I want my Santa Claus to be Jewish, he can be Jewish. And they said, can I print that? And I said, go ahead. And I told Jared, because it's kind of funny, I outed him on CNN because I knew he would be watching it. And I said, he's going to be my Santa Claus. He's in negotiations to be. So he goes and buys a Santa Claus suit, and he brings his two dogs down. One of the guy that works in his office has these two great big old poodles. Let's see, Bonbon and Pepper, I think their name. And they're wild poodles. They're great big old tall things. They're wonderful. And he walks down the hall and they were like his reindeer, and it was the greatest thing of all time. But CNN blocked me for that, and I thought, whatever.
But you're back now.
I'm back. I'm back with a fury.
Yeah, that's good.
I guess the ratings dipped.
Yeah, no, the ratings actually have been dipping on the mainstream. It's getting pretty bad for them. And you think about like podcasts. You were on Sean Ryan. Sean's a friend, and
talked to Sean this morning.
Yeah, great guy. And he
was my guest for the State of the Union.
Really?
Yeah. Honestly, I until he came along, I'd never really sat in a podcast like this setting. I'd seen bits and pieces of them on YouTube and stuff, and Rogan and all that, but I'd never done it. And then Eli Crane, who's a fellow Navy SEAL with him, I'm not, they're SEALs. And he said, hey, he's interested in UFOs, would you? And so I said, well, sure, I'll do it. And he said, you got to go to Nashville. And I said, well, if I go to Nashville, I'm going to eat at Arnold's. That's right. The meat and three. That's my place.
That's awesome. And what did you, like Sean's is really long, right?
Yeah, it's 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's like I told somebody I could have watched Gone with the Wind in the same amount of time.
Yeah, it's a long way. His show has done so good, and he's got this. I don't know. It's a demeanor where he just asked very direct, simple questions, and he's very very intuitive too. So it's pretty impressive watching him go. What did he think of the State of the Union?
I think he was disgusted.
Was he?
Mainly, he's a fairly conservative guy, like we all are, I guess. But he, it's history, and I think everybody should have to endure one of those in their lifetime. It's different watching it on television though than watching it in real life, just seeing the interactions, and of course it's getting a lot more volatile. They arrested that poor Marine's father, which I thought they should have just escorted him out. He lost his son needlessly. He was one of the 13 that died, and and then his other son ended up, in all the grief, ended up committing suicide. I thought that's just too much, and those kids shouldn't have died. I asked the last person to die in Afghanistan was their constituents of mine. He was a staff sergeant named Ryan Canals. He was in the Army, and they shouldn't have died. They had the suicide bomber. And I asked this question of the Marine sniper. They had the suicide bomber in their sights twice. And the Pentagon and the State Department called him off both times. And they got our people killed. And that's wrong. And they should have, somebody should have lost their ass over that. That's just, to me, that's inexcusable. And because of the media has no guts, and is totally in bed with this president. They just let it slide.
Yeah.
And to me, that's inexcusable. Inexcusable.
Well, you think about, that's really where the detachment is with the regular American. because, you see the media not digging into these legitimate stories. They would with Trump or someone they didn't like. They would just go after him. Well, they did they're still going after him. But,
I remember how they went after Bush. I wasn't a fan of his, but still they went after him, and then they and they now he's the greatest thing in the world. They think they sort of talk and they revere him, because they're trying to compare him to Trump, because Trump just doesn't kiss their ass.
Yeah, that's right.
He shook up the machine.
He did, and with the way media is going now, podcasts are coming on strong. You think about
they can't control it.
They can't, and like Joe Rogan, the power he has with his platform, combined with Elon Musk. I don't know where the United States would be right now if we didn't have Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, like pushing the free speech. CNN tried to take Joe out over the COVID thing. And I mean, he just hammered. Joe's a fighter.
Oh, yeah.
He interviewed Sanjay Gupta. If you haven't seen that interview,
I have not.
3 hours long, maybe on a car ride or whatever. He destroyed Sanjay. And that's what pissed CNN off. But he can say whatever he wants. He doesn't have a giant team. It's his thing that he built. And, and Elon, same thing with Twitter. I have I have some questions about Elon, but I like what he's done with Twitter.
I got questions about Trump. I don't want him teaching my daughter's Sunday school class. I've been in a room with two people in my life that literally, when they walk in and they are the energy, they suck it all out. I mean, it's just boom. Mm-hmm. It's Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Interesting.
I've never experienced anything. You walk in and Netanyahu. I mean, he's a stone cold killer, man, and he is. And I would not want to mess with him. And he was interesting. We talked about the Iron Dome. I remember if I could imitate him for you, I said, he goes, Tim, if they shoot a missile at us, we know within, I forget what he says, within 2.5 seconds where it's going to land. If it's going to land in a field, we let it go. If it's going to land in a neighborhood, we blow it up, and then we go kill them. Like, I bet you do, brother.
Wow.
And Trump, he is, I always, people don't like it, but, I always talk about King David. King David was a dirtbag. I mean, he was, he slept with Bathsheba, his best friend's wife. He was a great general, and he had his best friend killed, but he turned out to be, what put Israel on the map, literally. And not that Trump's had anybody killed that I know of. He's not a Clinton, obviously. But that's for another podcast. I'm sure that'll get me in trouble, but I don't care. But, and Trump, he's so personable. And my little girl drove down with me. I remember when we first met him, I was mayor of Knox County, and they were going to bring him in, and they were going to at a high school or something. I said, well, you need to do it at a school near the interstate so you can get to the hospital. You got all those things you got to take into consideration. And I said, they said they needed, and I said, probably a few hundred people. And I said, and then I got sniffing around. The people were calling me, and I called somebody. I said, hey, is this Trump? And they said, yeah. I said, well, I can't really say. And I said, okay, so it is. And they were a friend of mine. And I said, dude, no, we got to get something bigger than that. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up going downtown in the convention center. And we go backstage, and he walks in, and I have my wife and my daughter with me. And, I've been in a million of those lines. You pay your $10,000, the big shots do. You shake your hand. He flirts with your wife. You take the picture, and then you go. And then, not Trump. It was me. It was Kelly, Isabel, my little girl, and me. And Isabel was a little girl then, and she was and her sock got caught in her boot, and she was jumping around. And I've got pictures of this. There's this whole scenario, and somebody took them, and I said, take some pictures, and they just kept filming. That was great. And he's like, what's wrong with your boot, Isabel? And she says, my sock's caught in my boot, Mr. Trump. And you can see him leaning over, and he's talking to her. And he's like, well, get your sock out of there, honey, or does something. He went straight from, mogul to granddad, just 2.7 seconds, and and he talked to us, and he you can see his voice. You can see in the pictures too. He's got the Trump, and then he goes Trump face because he said he was talking to me because I won with 85% of the vote when I was elected mayor, which is very unusual. I had a great team and perfect. Ran against a former sheriff, and in Tennessee, sheriffs are the most powerful entity in a county government. And we were fortunate enough to win with that, and he knew that, and he started into my, how did I win that? And he went from the smile to and you can see he went right to Trump face. And then he went to Isabel, and I told my wife after he walked away, she said, "What do you think about that, honey?" I said, "Honey," if enough people see this guy, he's going to be president.
Called it.
Because it was just, I said, because his deal is real.
Yeah.
But anyway, I can talk about that all day. But he was, and I've been with him where he just stops and talks to a custodian, and and one last thing, he had me in the Oval Office, and he says, "What are you working on, Tim?" And I said, "I'm having trouble with the VA." And he goes, "Really, what?" And I said, "Well, I got some buddies of mine, are military, have called the suicide hotline, and they put them on hold, and then they don't call them back." He looks at his guy and he goes, "Hey, whatever guy's name, is that true?" And the guy says, "I don't know, Mr. President." And he looks at me and says, "What do you want me to do about it, Tim?" I said, "Fix it, Mr. President." And he looks at the guy and goes, "Fix it now." "Yes, sir." He said, "Follow me, Congressman."
Wow.
Next day. But now they've gone back to putting people on hold. But
that's awesome.
That is real leadership. He didn't check with the VA. He didn't check with his advisors. He didn't call the United Nations. And I know you got to go. I have one last. Can I tell one more Trump story?
Oh, sure. And I got 2 more questions too.
Okay. Well, Trump's allegedly, I've been told this by some pretty informed sources at Mar-a-Lago, and Xi Jinping's down there with him. And I don't know, I guess their wives are there. And as Trump would say, "I'm having the most delicious chocolate cake," And so they lean over him. And I think it was Syria where they had gone in and killed some of their own people. It was just horrible. And we sent 90 cruise missiles on them, and it rained some hellfire on them, I guess. I think it was 90. I'm not sure. And I wished I could remember. I'm going to have to research it. I thought it was Syria. But anyway, and so somebody comes in and whispers in the president's ear and says, in fact, they've done that. And so Trump says to Xi Jinping, he says, "We just sent, we sent these cruise missiles over took care of them." Xi Jinping puts his fork down and says, "They shouldn't have been gassing kids." Picks up his fork and they go on and eat. He didn't. Every leader we've had, Obama, Bush, you go down the list, Clinton, they would have checked with the UN, they would have checked with things, they would it'd have been just a demonstration of our missile systems because they wouldn't have killed anybody. They probably wouldn't have done anything. Not with Trump. He took it aside, and he did that with terrorists. I can tell you, I've seen the pictures of blown up terrorists, that the only way they could identify this one cat was by his ring. He had this special ring. You could see the finger, and the hand was severed because it exploded. They put a cruise missile right on top of him, or a drone, actually. But that's what we need in the White House. We don't need these pansies that check with everybody. We need a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. He's a leader.
Sorry I rambled.
It's okay. No, he's a leader, and he's unpredictable. That's
he's a cowboy, according to some of them. That's what they
don't like. That's what they complain about. And it's like, well, maybe that's what made him so successful. And people, they forget he didn't get us in any wars. First president in a long time.
In my lifetime.
That says a lot. And the other thing I'll say about Trump, you look at his kids, and he's got good kids, and that says a lot too. Not someone has kids that are kind of messed up. Not that they're bad parents, but it does say a lot when you got
They're all business people.
Yeah, and they're straightforward, and they've kept their act together. So that says a lot as well. 2 more questions. Number 1, TikTok ban. They call it a ban. It's not really a ban. Yesterday, what do you think about that?
It's not a ban. I waited against the First Amendment, but it's really all it says is China can't control it, and they say, well, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't. But the reality, the corporation that owns it, one of the board sitting on the board is the CCP, the Chinese. And so it's Chinese Communist Party is sitting on that. They control it. You're talking about an issue. My wife and I were talking about aluminum cups that look like red Solo cups. And and what happens? Just within a matter of time, there's an ad appears on her phone.
Yeah.
The Chinese use that as a monitoring. It's a marketing system. It's also modifying our thought behavior. I believe that this transgender thing, which we never heard anything about before COVID,
Right.
hardly, and now it's just 12% of the pop, some crazy number, and kids just think it's normal because and I believe, my Southern Baptist in me tells me it's the devil doing that, but the Chinese communists they're weakening our kids any chance they get, and they're marketing garbage to them and non-realistic things.
Well, I think it says a lot that in China they don't allow the kids to be on a certain amount of time.
30 minutes a day.
There you go, and they get different types.
And it's
of
an
videos.
educational format.
There you go. That's all you need to know. And then if you use some common sense, and the Chinese government owns TikTok.
Well, we don't allow it on our military computers.
Right. I mean, it's obvious that they don't have the best intentions for our society.
No.
And it's being used to program kids. On the transgender issue, you're talking about it. The amount of transgenders are it's up like 1,000%, and they're like, oh well, there's going to be less suicides. Well, if it's up 1,000%, and you get a 5% drop in the suicide of that 1,000%, you still have way more people killing themselves than
Statistics don't lie, just statisticians.
Exactly. So it's pretty wild, but I'm actually happy about it. I believe in free speech, hardcore.
And I just saw where a group of American capitalists are going to buy or putting together a deal.
Yeah.
It's got to pass the Senate, but as I've stated in the past, we are compromised.
Yeah.
We are compromised. The Chinese, there's a member of Congress who had a relationship with a Chinese communist spy, was allowed by Pelosi to stay on the Intelligence Committee. We had
That's
it was
wild.
Dianne Feinstein. Her driver for years was a known Chinese communist spy.
What?
We have people the Chinese. I had breakfast. I guess it was a couple of years ago with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I remember him saying, "Tim, the Chinese and my building's the Longworth building. They know how many paper clips we use. They're monitoring. They monitored COVID and our response to that. They're monitoring our response to Ukraine like crazy. The political will and the cash flow and the flow of our military armament and how long it takes us to ramp up to replace missile defense systems, things like that. And they are watching every aspect of that and analyzing that for when they move on Taiwan. And then where else they're going to move on after that."
Yeah, the whole Taiwan thing. We don't have time to get into all that, but it's kind of scary stuff, And we gotta play our moves correctly, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Right. It needs to be done economically, and right now, with who we got in the White House, it's not. It's just write them a check, or just roll over.
Yeah.
Write them a tough letter.
Roll over and not really understanding what's going on. I don't think he understands anything. Bitcoin. What do you think right now? It's around 73,000. Some in Congress and the Senate want to ban it completely. Others love it.
I'm a free market capitalist, brother. I think capitalism outside of Christianity is taking more people out of despair than anything else. Mm-hmm. Christianity, of course, ultimately wins out eternally, but in my opinion. But the worst thing could happen is Congress getting in there and just like AI, serve on an AI committee. Nancy Mace chairs it. Same thing. You got a bunch of guys that are still driving around a '72 Vega with an 8-track tape player, listening to an Allman Brothers tape, which is pretty cool, by the way. But I love Dickie Betts, and Dwayne Allman. But the truth is that we don't understand it, and it's the wrong people. If I'm the youngest guy in there, I'm 59, and I was a big fan of the Doge.
Dogecoin.
I think I made like $25 or something.
That's
on
good.
it. I think I was trading it at, it's 3 cents. I think I had about $12 in it one time.
There you go.
Back in the day, I think, I don't know. But anyway, but all kidding aside, if we, I think we ought to just study it and just try to understand it and bring in some young folks that would, that get it, because we don't get it. And that's the worst thing. And some clown at the Treasury or whoever that wants to control everything, whispers in some powerful chairman's ear.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he slips something in one of those 3,000-page bills that dings it, and then we lose it forever.
Yeah.
And then it just, again, in our system, it's a shell game. I mean, our deal right now, I mean, this paper that we're printing, it's just, to me, it's beyond belief. You cannot continue diluting the purchasing power of Americans.
Yeah.
The president lied in his State of the Union address. He said, the economy is better. And I mean, the average American, even liberal economists will tell you, the average American is paying $200 to $600 more a month.
Yeah.
Just out of pocket, just on survival, bread, water, gasoline. I mean, just the stuff that we take for granted, that we have to, clothing, that we have to survive. And so that is a direct correlation with what we're doing. We're printing money and just giving it away.
Well, you think about inflation is a tax on the poor. We're
100%.
taxing the poor. And so,
and you don't, and they say, let's tax these corporations. Corporations don't pay tax. They just pass it on to you and me.
Yeah.
You're going to tax Budweiser?
Oh.
Yeah. When I was in the state legislature, I was sitting next to a lady. She said, we just put a nickel on a 6-pack of beer. We can pay for it. Yeah. The working man and woman's going to pay for it. Those are my people. I don't drink beer.
Right.
My best friends own the beer distributorship. the Budweiser, they're my biggest friends in the world probably. But, but passing it on to them, they're just going to pass it on to us.
Yeah.
And that's stupid. But that's the mentality. You say that, let's tax the rich. And there's not enough billionaires. You're going there's a guy that lives here in in Nashville. His name's Art Laffer. Mm-hmm. He created a thing called the Laffer curve. Yep. He's a buddy of mine, and I love him, man. He is so funny, and he makes economics, to me, make sense. He had me over his house one time. We had Stouffer's lasagna when I was in the state legislature. I mean, he advised Reagan and the Iron Lady in England, and and the Laffer curve though says, after these people get to a certain point, they're not going to make any more because they don't want to pay any more taxes.
Right.
And, it's a net gain of nothing. So why do they want to risk anything?
Right. No, I mean that's what Bitcoin is though, because it's a kind of a hedge against the dollar, because the more money they print, the higher it's going to go up. There's only going to be a certain amount ever mined.
Yep.
And it drives the price up every 4 years or so. The halving event happens. It cuts the supply in half. So supply and demand. Yep. And that's what you're seeing. The EFTs are in there. And so, I think it's a good option. I hope they don't try to overregulate it. They don't need to. Let it run.
Let it run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to respect your time. Thank you so much for coming over here again. And
sorry, I rambled a lot, brother.
No, you're great. I'm enjoying hearing you talk.
I enjoy it.
So, thanks so much. And hopefully we'll see you here soon.